Lives They Lived? Donna, Lucille Ball, the Queen of Monday Night. Mavam, Part 1, The Girl from Jamestown. In 1951, 40 million Americans stopped what they were doing every Monday night at 9 o'clock. They gathered around small, glowing screens in living rooms and barber shops and hotel lobbies. They watched a woman with wide blue eyes and a mop of red hair stuff chocolates into her mouth on a factory line. And they laughed. They laughed until they cried. Her name was Lucille Ball, and by the time she'd showed in 1989, she had become the most watched woman in the history of the world. But the story of how she got there, that is the story worth telling, because it was not luck, it was not beauty, and it was not the easy road that people sometimes imagine when they look at fame from a distance. It was work, decades of it, and it was will. A will so fierce it bent an entire industry around one woman's refusal to be told no. Pause. She was born on August 6, 1911 in Jamestown, New York, a small city in the western corner of the state, far from Manhattan, far from Hollywood, far from anywhere that made dreams come true. Her father, Henry Ball, was a telephone lineman. Her mother, Desiree, whom everyone called D-Day, was a piano player with a sharp wit and a restless heart. Lucille adored her father. She would remember him her entire life, though she barely knew him. Henry Ball died of typhoid fever in 1915. Lucille was 3 years old. Her mother was pregnant with her brother Fred. That loss cracked the family open. Dee had to go to work. She left Lucille and baby Fred with Henry's parents and later with a stepfather's family. Stern, joyless people who believed that children should be quiet and obedient and above all, still. Lucille was none of those things. She was loud. She was physical. She was always performing, always looking for the laugh, the reaction, the moment when someone forgot their troubles and paid attention to her. Her grandfather, Fred Hunt, encouraged this. He was a socialist and a free thinker and a lover of vaudeville. He took little Lucille to shows. He built a stage in the backyard and let the neighborhood children put on plays. He told her she was special. No one else did, not for a very long time. Pause. At 15, Lucille convinced her mother to send her to drama school in New York City, the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts. It was a real institution, and it attracted real talent. A young Bette Davis was a classmate. Bette Davis thrived. Lucille did not. Her teachers told her she had no gift. She was too shy, they said. Too stiff. Too quiet. One instructor sent a letter home to D-Daddy suggesting the family save their money. The girl, he wrote, would never make it. Lucille went home to Jamestown. She was crushed. But she did not stay crushed. That was the thing about Lucille Ball that the drama teacher did not see and could not measure. She got back up. She always got back up. She returned to New York. She found work as a model. She posed for commercial photographs and magazine ads. She became a Chesterfield cigarette girl, her face on posters across the city. She was tall, lean, striking. She had dark brown hair then, not red. The red came later, and slowly, through sheer persistence, she began to get small parts. A chorus line here, a walk-on there. She caught the attention of a talent scout from Hollywood. And in 1933, at the age of 22, Lucille Ball boarded a train for California. She would not come back east for a very long time. Pause. Part 2, The Queen of the Bees. Hollywood in the 1930s was a factory. The major studios, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, RKO, churned out hundreds of pictures a year. They needed bodies. pretty girls to stand in the background, handsome men to fill a doorway. And Lucille was willing to be a body. She was willing to be anything, as long as she was working. She signed with RKO Radio Pictures and spent the better part of a decade in small roles. She played showgirls and secretaries and wisecracking best friends. She was in dozens of films, most of them forgettable, many of them never seen again. The studio called her Queen of the Bees. It was not a compliment, but Lucille treated every role like an education. She studied the camera. She studied timing. She watched the great comedians, Buster Keaton, the Marx Brothers, Charlie Chaplin, and she learned something that would define her career. Physical comedy was a language, and she could speak it fluently. She could take a pratfall better than most men in Hollywood. She could contort her face into expressions that made people laugh before she even opened her mouth. She had a rubber body and a rubber face and absolutely no vanity about using them. This was unusual. In 1930s Hollywood, glamour was everything. Women were supposed to be beautiful and composed. They were not supposed to fall down. They were not supposed to make ugly scenes. They were not supposed to be the joke. Lucille did not care about supposed to. She never had. Pause. In 1940, she met a man who would change her life in ways she could not have predicted. Desi Arnaz was a Cuban bandleader, young, magnetic, wildly handsome. He had fled Havana as a teenager after the revolution of 1930. He stripped his wealthy family of everything. He rebuilt himself in America with a conga drum and a smile that could light up a room. Lucille fell for him immediately. He fell for her. They were married within 6 months. It was a passionate marriage. It was also a difficult one. Daisy toured constantly with his band. Lucille stayed in Hollywood making pictures. They spent more time apart than together. There were arguments. There were jealousies. There were stretches of silence that worried their friends. But there was also something else, a creative electricity between them. When they were together, when they performed together, something happened that neither could achieve alone. They were funny, not just amusing, truly deeply funny. They had chemistry that audiences could feel through a screen. The question was how to harness it. And the answer, when it came, would change American entertainment forever. Pause when. Part 3, Monday Night. By the late 1940s, Lucille had found real success, not in film, but on the radio. She starred in a CBS comedy called My Favorite Husband, playing a scatterbrained wife who drove her patient husband to loving distraction. It was a hit. The network wanted to bring it to television. Lucille agreed on one condition. She wanted Desi to play her husband. CBS said no. The executives were polite but firm, a Latin band leader with a thick Cuban accent, married to an American redhead. Audiences would never accept it, they said. It was too unusual, too ethnic, too risky. Lucille did not argue. She simply refused to do the show without him. And then she and Desi did something remarkable. They took their act on the road. They performed together in theaters and clubs across the country, proving to live audiences that the pairing worked, that people laughed, that nobody cared about the accent. CBS relented. In October 1951, I Love Lucy premiered. It was a sensation from the first episode. Within weeks, it was the most watched program on television. Within months, it had reshaped American life in ways that seem almost impossible to believe now. Monday nights became sacred, stores closed early, telephone usage dropped. A department store in Chicago posted a sign in its window. We love Lucy too, so we're closing on Monday nights. At its peak, The show drew nearly 70% of all television viewers in the country. When Lucy Ricardo had a baby on the show, timed to coincide with Lucille's real-life delivery of Daisy Arnaz Jr. in January 1953, more Americans watched than tuned in the next day for the inauguration of President Eisenhower. 72 million people for a comedy about a woman who wanted to be in the show. Pause. What made it work? Scholars and critics have debated that question for 70 years, but the answer may be simpler than anyone wants to admit. Lucille Ball was fearless. She would do anything for the laugh. She would stomp grapes in a vat until she was soaked in purple. She would set her nose on fire with a cigarette lighter. She would stuff her cheeks with bread until she looked like a chipmunk. She would wrestle another woman in a vat of chocolate. She would wear absurd costumes and speak in ridiculous voices and fall down over and over and over with the timing and precision of a master athlete. And yet, there was always tenderness beneath the chaos. Lucy Ricardo was not a fool. She was a dreamer. She wanted more than her living room. She wanted to sing and dance and be seen. And every week she failed. And every week Ricky forgave her. And every week 40 million Americans saw themselves in that cycle of ambition and failure and love. It was not just comedy. It was comfort. It was recognition. In an anxious new decade, with the Cold War building and the world changing fast, Lucy Ricardo reminded people that it was all right to want things. It was all right to fail, and it was all right to laugh about it. Pause. Part 4, The Empire. But here is what many people did not see and what history has been slow to acknowledge. While Lucille Ball was falling down on camera, she was standing very tall behind it. She and Desi had formed their own production company to make I Love Lucy. They called it Desilu Productions. It was Desi's idea, and his business mind drove many of the early decisions. But the company belonged to both of them, and the decisions they made were revolutionary. They insisted on filming the show on 35mm film, not broadcasting it live. This was expensive and unusual, but it meant every episode could be rerun, could be sold, could be shown again and again, year after year. Lucille and Desi had invented the rerun, and with it, the entire model of syndication that would drive television economics for the rest of the century. They also insisted on filming before a live studio audience, using 3 cameras simultaneously. This technique, the 3-camera setup, became the standard for situation comedies. It is still used today. Desilu grew. They bought the old RKO studio lot, the very studio where Lucille had once been a B-movie nobody. Now she owned it. They produced other shows, The Untouchables, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, programs that had nothing to do with comedy, but everything to do with vision and risk. And then the marriage fell apart. Pause. It had been unraveling for years. The drinking, the arguments, the infidelities that tabloids whispered about and friends confirmed. They had 2 children, Lucy, born in 1951, and Desi Jr., born in 1953. Lucille tried to hold things together. She believed in marriage. She believed in family. She had grown up without a father, and she did not want that for her children. But by 1960, it was over. They divorced. And as part of the settlement, Lucille bought out Desi's share of Desilu Productions. She became, at that moment, the first woman to run a major television studio. She was not a figurehead. She was not a name on a door. She ran the company. She approved budgets. She greenlit pilots. She made decisions that shaped what America watched. When Gene Roddenberry brought her a strange, expensive science fiction pilot about a starship called Enterprise, most of her advisors told her to pass. It was too costly, too weird, too unlike anything on television. Lucille ordered a second pilot. Star Trek went on the air in 1966. It became one of the most influential television programs ever made. She had the eye, she had the nerve, and she had something that no amount of business school could teach. She understood what audiences wanted before they knew it themselves. Pause. Part 5. The cost success like that does not come free, and Lucille Ball paid for hers. She was lonely after the divorce, deeply, agonizingly lonely. She missed Desi. She would miss him for the rest of her life, even after she married again. A solid, kind comedian named Gary Morton, who adored her but who was not Daisy. No one was Daisy. She continued to work. She starred in The Lucy Show through the 1960s and Here's Lucy into the 1970s. The programs were successful, but critics noted a hardening. The spontaneity was gone, some said. The joy was thinner. In private, she worried. She worried about her children, who were growing up famous and struggling with it. Desi Jr. was in the tabloids constantly as a teenager, dating, partying, living a public life that his mother could not control. Lucy was quieter but carried her own burdens. Lucille worried about her legacy. She worried about growing old. She worried about being forgotten. She should not have worried about that. Pause. In her later years, she became something like American royalty, not the distant, formal kind, the kind you felt you knew, the kind that reminded you of your own mother, your own aunt, your own neighbor who always had something sharp to say and a pie in the oven. She received the Kennedy Center honors. She was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. Younger comedians, women especially, spoke of her with reverence. Carol Burnett, Mary Tyler Moore. They credited her. They said she made it possible. Lucille accepted the praise graciously, but she did not soften. She remained exacting. She remained demanding. She could be difficult, and she knew it. She was not interested in being easy to work with. She was interested in being good. In 1980, she and her old friend Bob Hope appeared together at the Academy Awards. The audience gave her a standing ovation. She looked frail. Her hair was still that impossible red. Her eyes were still enormous. She smiled, that wide, famous smile, and you could see, for just a moment, the girl from Jamestown who had been told she would never make it. Pause, Guerra. Part 6, April 1989. On April 18, 1989, Lucille Ball suffered a heart attack at her home in Beverly Hills. She was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Surgeons operated for hours. She seemed to recover. She spoke to her family. She was alert and characteristically impatient. Then, on the morning of April 26th, her heart failed again. She was 77 years old. The news moved across the country like a wave. People wept openly, in offices, in grocery stores, on the street. Flowers piled up outside her home. The tributes poured in from every corner of public life. Desi Arnaz had died 3 years earlier, in 1986. His last words to Lucille, spoken on the telephone, were reported by those close to them. He said, "I love you too, honey." They were buried separately. They had lived most of their lives apart, but in the public memory, they have never been separated. They are still Lucy and Ricky. They are still standing in that apartment on East 68th Street, arguing and scheming and falling into each other's arms. Pause by Part 7, What Remains? So what do we make of Lucille Ball all these years later? She was a comedian, yes, one of the greatest who ever lived. But she was also a businesswoman who outmaneuvered men who had been doing this their whole lives. She was a pioneer who insisted on showing her real pregnancy on television when the word pregnant itself was considered unfit for broadcast. She was a wife who loved a complicated man and built something extraordinary with him, and then survived when it fell apart. She was not always kind, she was not always easy. She drove herself relentlessly, and she drove others the same way. She could be cold, she could be cutting. She was, by many accounts, deeply insecure beneath the bravado. Still that girl from Jamestown, still hearing the drama teacher's verdict, still trying to prove something to someone who had stopped listening long ago. But here is what is worth remembering. In the early 1950s, America was learning to watch television. The medium was new and uncertain, and no one quite knew what it could do. And the person who showed them, the person who defined what a television star could be, what a television show could look like, what a television company could become, was a woman who had been told over and over that she did not have what it took. She had it. She had all of it. She just had to build the stage herself. Pause. There is a question that Lucille Ball never fully answered, and perhaps no one can answer for her. Was it worth it? The loneliness, the broken marriage, the years of grinding work before anyone noticed, the years of grinding work after everyone noticed, the price that fame extracts from the people closest to the famous. She was asked some version of this question in interviews late in life. She usually deflected. She made a joke. She changed the subject. She was good at that. But once, in a quiet moment, she said something that stayed with the people who heard it. She said she had been lucky, not because things had been easy, but because she had found the thing she was meant to do, and she had done it. Maybe that is enough. Maybe that is the only answer anyone gets. 60 million people once watched her stuff chocolates into her mouth on a Monday night. They are still watching. Somewhere right now on some screen, Lucy Ricardo is hatching a plan. Ricky will find out. Ethel will get dragged into it. Fred will complain, and it will all go wonderfully, beautifully wrong. And someone watching for the first time or the 100th will laugh, the way their parents laughed, the way their grandparents laughed. That is what remains. That and the red hair, always the red hair. Lives They Lived is a production of this channel, Lucille Desiree Ball, 1911 to 1989.